And that is award-winning saxophone player Elijah Jamal Balbed from right here in Washington, D.C. We'll be speaking with him in just a moment. I'm Alex Marquardt here in the U.S. Capitol as the country celebrates its 250th anniversary. And as we mark this moment, we want to take a look at American culture, its impact around the world, film, music, food, even theme parks. John Hendren is in Hollywood exploring the wide global reach of American culture.
America projects global power through the world's most formidable military and through the economic sway of the U.S. dollar as the currency of choice. But its influence, its ability to change people's minds around the world, that comes largely through the soft power of American culture. In cuisine, there is the humble hamburger and the global ubiquity of McDonald's, with billions served from Paris to St. Petersburg. On radios and in clubs around the world bring the inescapable strains of distinctly American music, from jazz to blues.
Thrill is gone. The thrill is gone away.
To crooners.
It's up to you, New York, New York.
And rock and roll. Even the biggest bands of the British invasion, the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, came to the U.S. as tax exiles. But no aspect of American culture spreads as broadly or as effectively as Hollywood, with films conveying classic American archetypes, cowboy swagger.
And somebody ought to belt you in the mouth. But I won't. I won't. The hell I won't.
New Yorker bravado. And the undefeated everyman refusing to bow.
You think I'm licked? You all think I'm licked? Well, I'm not licked. And I'm going to stay right here and fight for this lost cause.
The accents are distinctly American.
Hey, Stella!
Even when the actors are not.
I'm just dying to dance.
I want to thank you all for coming here tonight and drinking all of my booze.
Do you find an American accent easy?
No.
Why not?
It's really hard.
What's the hardest part about it?
The R's.
The R.
Through slavery, civil rights abuses, and immigration roundups that turned deadly, America doesn't always live up to those images. But in the words of an Irish poet,
America is not just a country. It's an idea. And that idea sort of belongs to everybody.
America's most iconic export is facing new challenges, including an exodus of filmmakers to cheaper venues. So now lawmakers and the studios are using tax breaks and other incentives to boost the industry so it can continue to export not just American films, but also the values of freedom and innovation that put Hollywood at the center of global culture. John Hendren, Al Jazeera, Hollywood.
And speaking of exports, one of America's biggest cultural exports has to be Disney. The animation studio, which started with the likes of Cinderella and Snow White, is now worth more than the annual GDP of countries like Morocco and Kenya. It may be a symbol of soft power, but why are so many people obsessed? From the town of Celebration, which is near Orlando in Florida, Phil Lavelle reports.
Once upon a time, a man and a mouse had a dream. And they've been exporting that dream, the American dream, around the world for more than a century.
I like the magic.
See, America is a military and financial superpower for sure. But the super soft power of Disney, perhaps the USA's ultimate commercial weapon. Few brands so iconic or as rich, valued at around $180 billion in mid-2026.
People love Disney, that's all there is to it.
Bruce lives in his own Disney World near the famous Florida theme parks. From the kitchen,
I got the menus here from the restaurants,
to the bedroom,
put some cannons in, try to make them as real as possible.
To every room, there is Disney. and more Disney.
Mikey, I will never sell this guy. This was the best thing I ever bought.
And more Disney.
This is actually from the movie right here with the Haunted Mansion.
Talk about a super fan. He wouldn't have it any other way.
It makes me happy. I don't have to go to the park. I wake up in the morning, everything's here. Everything disappears, okay? The day disappears, my job disappears, my problems disappear. I go into that reality.
This is the way.
There are two parts to Disney. First, you've got the entertainment side, so that's movies, TV networks, streaming apps, theatre adaptations, bringing in around $1.3 billion profit per quarter. But movies and content are just the beginning. The experiences side is a way bigger cash maker. Think theme parks and cruises. $2.6 billion in profit every 3 months, double the entertainment section. And the resorts are everywhere. 2 big ones in the United States. France has Disneyland Paris. China has 2 sprawling sites, plus 1 in Japan. They are virtual cash machines, and the money rolls in.
What does Disney make you feel like?
Happy.
Fueled by an innocence and happiness that grabs the kids.
I feel like my magic just became powerful.
And a nostalgia which hooks the grown-ups in, like Raydriana.
Disney helps heal so many adults.
Who moved to Florida from Ohio just to be nearer the magic she grew up on.
I don't know how to explain it besides literally pure happiness is what it brings out. It brings out that child in me. When he fell in love with it, I just knew at that moment, okay, we had to move. So those special memories and moments that I had, I got to pass them down and share with my kids.
To see how deep the Disney buy-in goes, check out this place. This is the town of Celebration in Florida. It looks like a movie set. You've got the perfect Maid Street. You've got the town clock. You've got the white picket fences and the beautiful, pristine lake. And that is because Disney literally built this place, modeling it on the hyper-sanitized, idealistic vision of small-town America that it has spent decades selling to the world. People don't just visit here, they actually live here. This is where real life and Disney fantasy all come together.
It is the American dream, basically, Walt Disney and Disney World.
What started with a cartoon mouse, now a symbol of global American influence, a beacon of the happiest place on earth, enjoyed by billions for 100 years plus. And the end, nowhere in sight. Phil Lavelle, Al Jazeera, near Orlando, Florida.
We are joined now by Elijah Jamal Balbed, an award-winning saxophone player, as well as a composer and educator, and Professor Michael O'Malley, a professor of U.S. history at George Mason University. And we also have to note, Professor, you are a musician yourself. You play the bass, jazz guitar, and Irish wooden flute. So thank you both for being with us. Professor, I want to come to you. We've heard the phrase soft power a number of times in those pieces. Obviously, film, TV, music have played huge roles in America's influence around the world. How much do you think America's global standing comes from those cultural exports?
I think it's been an enormous...
You should know, we're also joined by fighter jets overhead that are rehearsing for tomorrow's July the 4th over the National Mall. But please.
It's been an enormous part of America's cultural influence, and it was recognized by the United States in the mid-20th century, famously when the U.S. State Department sponsored goodwill tours by jazz musicians, Louis Armstrong, other people who went to countries the United States was interested in influencing. But also earlier, the influence of American movies is almost immeasurable. They set a style and a format that's emulated worldwide. And it's often argued that American movies are so powerful because they were themselves made by immigrants to speak to an immigrant audience. So if you look at the classic Hollywood directors, they're often immigrants themselves. Frank Capra, John Ford was an Irish immigrant family. Lots of the Hollywood moguls were Jewish immigrants. And that multiculturalism, I think, is part of what allows them to forge a language that can speak across the world.
Elijah, you've toured all over the world with your music, and I want to speak about music more specifically in just a moment, but how do you see the impact of American art on the world?
Well, it's funny, Michael mentioned the State Department Jazz Ambassadors tours. I've gone on those a couple times now, and in some cases been in front of audience that don't speak a word of English. And it's just so powerful that it reminds us that music is a universal language, but that jazz is so appreciated all around the world. I've been to Russia, London, even Doha, and to find jazz fans in Doha. And I always think about my perspective being on stage, when I look out in the audience, I'm always seeing such a diverse group of people who all come together for one thing, jazz.
Yeah, it is something that is so quintessentially American. Professor, going back to Hollywood and Disney, they have exported a vision over the years of, or a representation of the U.S., of America. So much of the world, as you noted, sees the U.S. through those eyes. Do you think it's an accurate and good representation?
In some ways. I mean, Disney himself, Walt Disney, was an interesting man. His father was a sort of prairie socialist.
Apologies, another one of those jets?
Yeah.
Please.
His father was a prairie socialist, and he worked on the 1893 Columbian Exposition, which was a kind of, it was to celebrate Columbus's arrival in America. It was a celebration of American culture and kind of a utopian vision. They built an entire artificial city in Chicago. And his father remembered working on that, and Walt grew up with stories about that. So we had a utopian side that was driven to try and express what you could say is the aspirations of American life from the point of view of a small-town Midwesterner. And he stuck to that, and he often had a populist streak that was sympathetic to ordinary people, to the everyman. So in that sense, that part is very accurate. A lot of his heroes are regular guys. You know, they're sort of the regular person, not the Lord, right. not the president.
Right. All right, guys, stay with me. We have more to discuss. But every culture on earth makes music. But the U.S. took its music and really turned it into a big business. American artists now dominate so many of the charts worldwide, and it has had a profound influence on the music industries in so many other cultures and so many different countries. Al Jazeera's Alex Baird traveled around this country to trace the story of American music. He filed this report.
This is where the hits are made, in studios like these in Manhattan. The business behind it, around $11.5 billion last year. That's more than the economies of around 40 countries. But what does that sound like?
This is America.
This is one of the places where it all began. New Orleans, the home of jazz. And as you can hear, music is still very much a part of this city's life. Now, any story about American music leads back here. So, how did this city come to encapsulate a uniquely American story? Jazz is that in a nutshell. In the late 1800s, black communities here took the rhythms of enslaved ancestors and mixed them with the city's European and Caribbean heritage. What they created spread fast across the states, carried north as millions of black families left the segregated South. It didn't take long for jazz superstars like Louis Armstrong to take that sound global. The first big American musical export. Now in the 50s, even the State Department saw that as an opportunity. That's Louis Armstrong, by the way. It began sending prominent racially integrated jazz bands on global tours to counter Soviet influence during the Cold War. It was labeled at the time as America's secret weapon, a blue note and a minor key.
You feel, Louis, that American jazz can be an instrument for spreading goodwill overseas?
I think so. Because over there, jazz is stronger than Masons. It's just like a religion.
These are just some of the musicians we've met during our time here in New Orleans. You can tell music is still the beating heart of the city. So if the heart is here, let's take a look now at where the music industry really took off. Welcome to Nashville, Tennessee, one of the places where American music became big business. Alongside New York and LA, this is where the American music industry really took shape. The songs, the studios, the labels, and the stars. Here it happened in waves. Radio in the 20s, publishing in the 40s, and Music Row in the 50s. Together, these cities built a machine that sold the world blues, rock and roll, soul, and pop. By the late 70s, it was a $4 billion a year business, bigger than Hollywood. And here in Nashville, that sound was just a little bit country. But it's here, in the recording studio, where the US really took over. This is Jungle City Studios, and some pretty big names have recorded here. We're talking Taylor Swift, Jay-Z, Beyonce, Kendrick Lamar, and in this very seat, Kanye West. And it's big names like those that have built this industry to be the biggest on the planet, roughly 40% of the global music market. They've taken American sounds like hip-hop, which rose out of the streets of the Bronx in the 1970s, and made it into one of the most successful genres on the planet. Made here, or inspired by here, take the America out of the music, and it just doesn't sound the same.
We're back now with Elijah and Michael. Elijah, you are a jazz saxophone player. Jazz, of course, a historic form of music. Today, not the most commercial kind. How do you, as a young person, make sure that it grows, that it endures in this highly commercial environment?
Absolutely. Well, I always say jazz has this way of always staying current. I was born in 1990, so even before I got into jazz, my love was hip-hop and R&B, actually. And these days, I'm on gigs oftentimes with folks a lot younger than me. I look young, but sometimes I'll be on a gig with a 20-year-old, and they have this way of approaching the music that's very fresh and organic. And I think naturally, the music that we listen to gets, like we were talking about New Orleans, like gumbo, you just put it all in together and naturally it stays current on its own.
So much, Professor, of these unique American art forms come from the Black community and are intertwined with the struggle for racial equality. When you think about the birth and the explosion of different kinds of predominantly Black music, whether it's gospel, jazz, blues, of course, the list goes on. You mentioned R&B. Where does music figure in that fight for racial equality?
It's very hard to you can't overstate the importance of Black musical traditions in American music generally. Almost all of what's understood as American music is Black music at some level, even country music. But it's not only made by African-American people, it's made by many different people. And it's always been an art form that's interested in growing, as Elijah said, and interested in hybridizing. I think it's really important to mark that. And it's a difficult challenge for say, my students to navigate what constitutes appropriation of a cultural tradition and what amounts to appreciation or participation in. It's difficult to balance those two things. I think what I tell them is approach your interest with knowledge of the history of what you're doing and with affection and respect for the people in whose tradition you're participating, is what I say.
Both of you have mentioned the State Department, and we have seen the State Department use music as a way to curry favor and build on American popularity. The CIA has had musical operations, if you will, that are a bit more covert. I'm thinking of Nina Simone. Michael, to what extent has the U.S. government, those agencies and departments I mentioned, used music as a tool to advance American interests and weaken adversaries, frankly?
Yeah, they certainly have. And during the Cold War, the Soviet Union was very alarmed about American popular music as a tool. They saw it as a tool and they sought to prohibit it. And they were aware of its sort of, you could say, corrosive influence. Because it was forms of musical expression that were tainted with popular culture, tainted with commercialism, tainted with African-American influence. But at the same time, it's immensely popular. And I think it's popular partly for the same reason as the movies. It was formed by people who were engaged in a dialogue with mainstream popular culture. So early jazz was played by white people. The term jazz was first used, as far as I know, to describe white musicians, the original New Orleans jazz band, and becomes a general term. It's just difficult to sort that out. The State Department and other government entities have recognized the value of jazz and American popular culture generally, and they should. It deserves to be celebrated. It's an enormously dynamic and compelling art form.
I'd be remiss if we didn't take advantage of the fact that Elijah is here and that you brought your saxophone. You played for us a little bit earlier. I want to listen more to what Elijah played for us here on set just a short time ago. Take a listen. Elijah and Michael, frankly, you're both products of the Washington music scene. And there's a kind of music that comes from Washington that I think most of our audience probably haven't heard of. It's unique. It was born here. It's called go-go music. Explain what that is.
What is go-go music? Well, in America, we don't have a lot of local territories or regions that have an indigenous style of music. But in Washington, D.C., we do. There's a guy by the name of Chuck Brown, who, an incredible guitar player and vocalist. He would go around and sit in with the different Latin bands in town. When you go see a salsa band, sometimes they break it down to just the percussions, and it becomes this big party. Everybody's dancing, having a good time. So apparently Chuck was inspired by that concept, and he incorporated percussion breakdowns in between the songs. So they would play 10, maybe 15 or 20 songs without stopping, just going all night long. And that's why they call it go-go, because it keeps going and going and going.
Has it had success in other cities? Has it been picked up? How is it respected in that scene?
Absolutely. There are actually go-go bands outside of the DMV in North Carolina, Atlanta. There's appreciation for it, usually generally on the East Coast or in the South. But believe it or not, they have a once-a-month go-go night in Tokyo, Japan.
Wow.
One of the times I went to Russia, we brought go-go to Russia, and I'm pretty sure that was something they had never experienced before. And going back to, them not speaking any English, but there was so much feeling coming from the stage and from the musicians. Sometimes we were able to communicate with each other even though we weren't speaking the same language at all.
Michael, when you look at the various cultural exports that we've touched on, is it possible to prioritize or rank them? I mean, if the State Department's seizing on music, for example, is that because the U.S. sees music as its most powerful cultural tool, or is that kind of unfair to put it like that?
I think it would have legs, as it were, without the State Department. In Ireland, they love country music. They have a whole genre called country and Irish, where because they're mostly country people, or they have been. I think it would have legs without the assistance of the State Department. And it's actually worked often outside of official channels. You could find people appreciating American music, wanting to play it. And then you can find forms that are clearly influenced by American music, but are their own thing. I mean, Jamaican reggae is clearly influenced by American soul music, but it's its own thing. And African music, Nigerian music, is its own thing with an ear for American music. So I think it would be successful and popular without the State Department's intervention. The State Department was wise, I think, to make use of this beautiful production of American culture.
And organically, it's something that obviously just naturally wants to be picked up on by other cultures. Like you use the Irish example.
Right. Its appeal is close to universal. I think in some ways similar to the movies.
All right. Well, thank you both so much for joining us. I mean, this is an area of American life that is obviously so deeply intertwined in the American story, deeply ingrained into who we are as a country. Elijah, Michael, thank you both so much. Elijah Jamal Balbed, an award-winning jazz saxophone player and a composer and educator. Michael O'Malley, a professor of U.S. history at George Mason University. And you can't finish a show about culture without the two things that we can't live without: food and drink. The United States has fundamentally changed the way the world consumes American products, and they can now be found for sale in more countries than there are members of the United Nations. Let's go back to Alex Baird, who has been eating and drinking his way around the country to tell this story.
American food and drink has made it into almost every corner of the globe. It's a story of how the US took all of this and turned it into this, and got the world hooked. But the first real American cuisine didn't start there. It started here, in New Orleans, with food like this. That's Chef Frank Brightson, one of the masters of Creole cuisine.
But it's this melting pot or gumbo pot that really defines Louisiana.
That melting pot began forming in the late 1700s with flavors from East Africa, Europe, and local tribes.
And that's it.
The first distinctly regional cuisine of the United States.
Every time we serve this, we tell a story, and it's a story of America.
But how did that story go global? Well, look to no other product than Coca-Cola. A Coke product is opened more than 2 billion times every single day in almost every country on the planet. So the question is,
Why do you sell Coca-Cola? Why do you sell Coca-Cola? Why do you?
well, that we can answer. It all started back in 1886. Famously, there were no video cameras back then, so here's some footage from the 40s and 50s. Coke was originally sold as a brain tonic at a pharmacy in Atlanta, Georgia, and it was a hit. Marketing ramped up, and by 1899, the company signed its first deal with an independent bottling company, the franchise model.
They like the taste, the delicious, refreshing quality of Coca-Cola.
Coke's advertising budget ballooned and went nationwide, and over the next 2 decades, bottling plants opened across the Americas, Europe, and Asia. Then came the Second World War. Coca-Cola pledged to provide a bottle of Coke to every US soldier.
A real Marine.
And by the war's end, the company had built 64 overseas bottling plants. That paved the way for a massive post-war expansion, so big that the term Coca-colonization was coined for the domination of American culture worldwide. That set the model for other American companies to pave their own way to global market domination. Think McDonald's, Starbucks, Subway, and don't forget the long list of confectionery snack brands most of us have bought. American-style fast food is now an $800 billion a year global industry, and has changed the way the world consumes.
And that's all for now from us here in Washington. We'll be back a little bit later with more flavor of U.S. culture, along with veteran jazz sax player Marshall Keys and professor of history and American studies Maurice Jackson. I'm Alex Marquardt. Thanks so much for joining us.